In the Pig family's house stood an old radio that Grandpa Pig had given them many years ago. It was wooden, with large round knobs and a cracked case. Usually the radio was silent, sitting on the shelf in the living room as decoration. But one evening, when the whole family gathered for dinner, quiet sounds came from the radio. At first it was just noise, like interference between stations. Daddy Pig approached the radio and turned the knobs, but the sound didn't disappear. On the contrary, it became clearer. Mummy Pig suggested turning off the radio, but when Daddy Pig pressed the button, nothing happened. The radio continued to make strange sounds, even though it was turned off. Peppa and George approached curiously. Voices were now coming from the radio. They were quiet, barely distinguishable, but gradually became louder. The voices spoke in an unfamiliar language that no one in the family understood. The words sounded ancient and ominous, like spells from old fairy tales. Suddenly, one of the voices spoke in English. It was childlike, but there was a strange wisdom in it. The voice said, "We have waited so long. We want to play. We want to be part of your family." Peppa felt goosebumps run down her spine. George hid behind Mummy Pig. The voices became more insistent. They began calling the family members by name, as if they knew them personally. "Peppa, come to us. George, we know you can hear us. Mummy Pig, Daddy Pig, you cannot ignore us." The radio began to glow with a dim red light, even though it had no bulbs. Daddy Pig tried to unplug the radio from the outlet, but the cord seemed to have grown into the wall. He pulled with all his strength, but nothing worked. The voices laughed, and their laughter echoed throughout the house. They said, "You cannot stop us. We are already here. We have always been here." Peppa noticed that her reflection in the TV screen began moving independently of her. It waved and smiled, even though Peppa herself stood motionless. George saw his shadow on the wall begin to dance, even though he wasn't moving. The voices from the radio grew louder, filling the entire house. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The radio fell silent. The red light went out. The family stood in silence, not daring to move. But when they looked at each other, they realized that something had changed. Their voices sounded different, as if new notes had appeared in them. And sometimes, when they spoke, it seemed that the words were not spoken by themselves. Since then, the radio never turned on again. But the family knew that the voices hadn't gone anywhere. They had simply found a new home. And now, when Peppa and George played, sometimes you could hear a quiet whisper coming from their lips. A whisper in that same unfamiliar language that once